Hi, welcome to another edition of Wired for Wealth, guiding you to achieve lasting financial freedom and peace of mind. I'm your host, John MacGregor. I want to be your antidote to your financial struggles. My goal for you is to help you think better so you can do better, so you can feel better about your financial situation. This is a really important show because I'm going to show you and highlight how you may be leaving a lot of money on the table with your investments. But before we do that, before we dig in, don't forget to ring that bell below and subscribe. You don't want to miss future episodes, and leave a comment. Would love to hear what you're thinking, your comments, your questions, your concerns, and also information that you're looking for, so that'll help me design the content that you need and want. All right, with that, folks, we are going to talk about investment fees. There is a ton of confusion in this area, but I will tell you, what I have witnessed firsthand is that fees can be a great destroyer of wealth over time. And most people have no idea what they're paying. Financial advisors that I've coached and trained have no idea the fees that they are charging their clients. It's amazing to me, but I'll tell you, it's extremely impactful and extremely devastating to see these fees go out the door and not into the client's pocket, not into your client, because you're unaware of what you're charging. Now, look, fees are inevitable. Right? They're inevitable in anything we do, whether we buy coffee, a car, or certainly investments. The key is, are you paying the appropriate amount for the services being rendered? And now, with a lot of transparency out there, it's pretty easy to identify the fees that you are being charged. It's in the prospectus, it's in the information, it's online, or you can simply just call up the investment provider and they will tell you what you are being charged. But again, this show is going to highlight how mind-blowing it is if you do not pay attention to this. Now, this episode is really focused on mutual funds and exchange-traded funds as well. And I wanted to kind of focus in that area because I know a lot of you have 401ks or retirement plans or IRAs or Roth IRAs, and you're using mutual funds or ETFs, primarily mutual funds, to invest your money. And so we're going to stick with that for this example. And I'm going to use sort of I'm going to use the S&P 500 as sort of our guideline, because that's a very popular investment. And by the way, the S&P 500 is a basket of the 500 largest stocks in America. And it rarely changes, right? It's a pretty static set and forget portfolio of the 500 largest stocks. Now, every once in a while, a stock will get kicked out and a new one comes in, but it's a pretty fixed basket of those 500 largest stocks. And it's a very popular investment as well, because it's a simple investment. It's a basic investment. And I highly encourage people to utilize it. And you will typically find a S&P 500 option in your 401k plan. Now, I'm not saying that's the be-all end-all investment, but I would recommend for most people that that's a good part or a piece of the overall puzzle that you would be investing in. The reason I like the 401 or the S&P 500 is because your money going into it gets instantly diversified amongst 500 of the largest companies. The other reason I like the S&P 500 is because over time, if you look at its performance going back 100 years, the S&P 500 has achieved approximately 10% average rate of return over time. Now, let me stop there. That doesn't mean it's getting 10% every single year, okay? That means it's up 16 one year, down 4 the next, up 8, down 3, up 12, down 5. But if you smooth those returns over time, the S&P has achieved a 10% average rate of return. So we're going to use that as an example. And this will blow your mind on the impact that fees have. And you don't want to be that person that comes into an advisor's office and says, I'm ready to retire, and realize that you've been paying way more than you should have, and you've left a significant amount of money on the table that could have meant a huge difference in your retirement. And this, like I said, will blow your mind when you see these numbers. Because look, here's the other thing I've seen before. Clients came into my office and I would say, hey, do you realize you're paying 0.5% more than you should be? And they'd be like, 0.5%, who cares? Or I'd see situations where you're paying 1% more than, just 1%, no big deal, I'll take care of it later. It is a big deal, so pay attention. Let me show you this. Okay, so I'm gonna use an example, right? In this case, someone starts with $100,000 in their account, right? And they're adding $10,000 per year. Follow me? And in this case, instead of that 10% rate of return that I mentioned with the S&P 500, I'm going to be a little more conservative here, and I'm going to say an 8% rate of return. And in this case, we're looking out 30 years, okay? Now, I'm going to use, for starters, a 2% rate of return. Now, I don't see a lot of mutual funds that are charging 2% anymore, especially in 401k plans. We've seen a lot of compression, and we've seen a lot of fee decline. But they're still out there, and you might find some in your 401k, and that should alarm you. Now, I'm saying that expensive funds should be avoided because some, very few, perform to the level that warrant a 2% or higher, even a higher investment fee consistently. But it's definitely a huge red flag if you're seeing investment fees over, I would say, 1%. But let's just start off with a baseline of an example of 2%. Now, remember, 100,000 to begin with, 10,000 a year, 8% rate of return, and a 30-year time horizon. If you excluded fees, and let's say it was free, at the end of the 30 years, you'd have $2.2 million. That's the gross, okay? Let me write that up here as well. That's the gross amount. Sadly, the gross amount is not what's in our account, right? It's the net amount after fees. So in this case, if you had a 2% fee for those 30 years, the net after fees would be $1.4 million. That equates to a $817,000 fee. That you just gave up. You just gave to somebody else. Think of what that could have done to your retirement, right? $817,000 that you left on the table because you weren't paying attention. I'm not being harsh on you. This is hardcore reality. I don't want this to happen to you. All right. So that's the extreme example. Well, I should say that's the extreme example. I mean, that may not be the extreme example. You just got to look at the investments that you're investing in. Now, let me just show you. If we did let's take it to 1%, okay? If you had a 1% fee, you are now looking at a net amount of $1.7 million. 1.7 versus 1.4. I mean, it's a lot better, but it still cost you $457,000 in fees. $457,000 in fees over 30 years in this scenario. I mean, still, it's not $817,000, but it's still a lot of money. I mean, think of what that could do for your retirement at 65 years old, or what that could do for your family, right? So let's look at this example where you actually invest in the S&P 500 itself, right? Now, I like the S&P 500. It's a passive investment. It's kind of a bread and butter investment. It's done well. It's not actively traded. And people say, well, you want your money actively managed and so forth. Very, very, very few money managers can outperform the S&P 500 over time. So in most cases, it doesn't make sense to pay for that money manager. It makes more sense to pay just for the S&P 500. Now, I just looked it up on Charles Schwab's account. The S&P 500 mutual fund charges, get this, 0.02%. Not 2%, not 1%, 0.02% annually. I mean, that's almost free. It's dirt cheap. You can only imagine what that did to your returns. So in this case, if you're only paying 0.02% for the S&P 500, you're going to net out at the end of the day $2.29 million. And your fee was approximately $10,000. $10,000 versus $457,000 versus $817,000. That is massive, folks. Can you see now the difference in my chicken scratch? I know I'm a horrible writer. It's my huge weakness of mine is like terrible writing. But now can you see what I'm talking about and how impactful and how fees can be such a destruction of wealth over time? So I'm asking you to do this. This is your action item for the day or for tomorrow when you get to work. I want you to pull up your 401k or your retirement plan or your IRA or your individual investments, whatever it is. And I want you to determine what you're paying. If you need to pick up the phone, go ahead and do it. They will tell you on the phone what the total fees are for your investments, okay? And then I want you to determine if that fund or that investment is worth the fee you're charging for. These S&P 500, and I'll write that up on the board if I have some room here. S&P 500, it's called an index fund. There are a lot of other index funds that do a lot of different things than what the S&P 500 does, but they're very, very inexpensive. And in most cases, you get the same returns as an active money manager. All right, I hope that helps. I hope that opens your eyes. And I hope, what I really hope, is that you take action from what you've just seen. All right, with that, don't forget, as I always say, I've got a lot of free stuff on my website that you can download today to start your journey to eliminate that financial stress and the anxiety and to get your financial life in order. Again, hit that button and hit that bell and subscribe. Leave a comment. Until next time, upward and onward. Take care. Bye-bye.